Alright, so I said I'd create this video for a few of my friends who I keep on telling to start taking pictures in RAW. So I guess to start with, I guess it's good to talk about what RAW actually is. So the RAW format is a uncompressed image file that comes out of your camera. It depends on your model of camera and the maker. What this actual file type is. But there's a lot of programs out there that are made to handle these file types. Be aware that a lot of programs like GIMP can't handle that. I believe Photoshop can, but I haven't tried. I don't actually use Photoshop. So to start with, I guess it's good to explain how to set your camera up to take RAW photos. So on my Canon camera, if I turn it on and go to Menu, the first option actually visible in my menu is Quality. When I go to that, I have options L, M, S, and variations of that. And then the last option I have is RAW, which is just a square with RAW in it. So when you go to this, your camera will now start taking RAW files, in my case .cr2 files. And then you need a program to analyze these, or to work with these. And to do that, I use a program called RawTherapee. I forget exactly how I found it. I was digging around on the internet a lot. It's free, and it works pretty well. I have up the website right here. So if you just go to Downloads, the first link is the one I downloaded, the first Windows one here. And so here's the program running with a picture I took. So this picture I took a couple weeks ago at Cranes Beach in Ipswich, which is a really nice place. Really pretty. This is actually up on the dunes. But right now the picture is not really that interesting. What Microsoft gives me in Photo Viewer looks like this, which is pretty nice, but still something that you need to realize with these pictures is that each program that opens it analyzes it slightly differently. There's a lot of data there, and it doesn't actually display the same way twice really very much. So in RawTherapee, we have all these options. We have exposure compensation, highlight compression, and all these other things under exposure. We have shadows and highlights. We have vignette filter, graduated filter, lab adjustments, SciCam stuff, which is, I guess that's a series of algorithms used to edit pictures. We have tone mapping, which I really like. So if you turn on tone mapping, what it does is it does a sort of HDR process, which just increases the dynamic range in a picture, increases the difference between dark and light, especially in like specific locations. So like the leaves on trees and things come through much more clearly with tone mapping enabled. And so here you can change the strength of this. I'm just going to go through and edit this picture and explain what I'm doing as I go through. So here we have exposure compensation. So this is essentially the exposure settings that come out of your camera. Your camera will actually do a lot of the exposure stuff on its own if you are shooting in JPEG. But here I want to brighten up the picture a bit because it looks kind of muddy and boring. I have highlight compression down to 0. Shadow compression is kind of a decent thing to have, although here it's not really that applicable. There's not too many really dark regions. Actually, I haven't used this version of RawTherapee before, but mostly the same. I want to make it a little lighter too, so lightness is different than the actual exposure value. I'm not entirely sure how, but the exposure tends to be a little bit more drastic. For me to do contrast, I tend to use a tone curve. So how this works is you add little handles to the tone curve, and you can drag up or down this line that essentially corresponds to values. So I tend to drag it down a little bit towards the first peak, because that's usually the most concentration of dark colors. We want those to be a bit darker. Then towards the middle, I find the middle peak, drag the line towards the center line, so that sets where the middle values are. And then towards the top, I tend to find another peak. This one doesn't actually have anything that dramatic except at the very end, which probably corresponds to all these white regions here. So I might go a little bit farther back just to brighten things up a little bit. Alright. So actually, this is kind of annoying me, so I'm going to rotate the image. Rotation in RawTherapee allows you to select a straight line. So I tend to go for a horizon line, which appears to be about here. The picture seems to be much, much more straight right now. Yeah. Another thing that seems to be a byproduct of using this raw processing program in particular is there just seems to be a bit of noise. I think that's mostly from the tone mapping, actually. Yeah, so most of the noise is generated by tone mapping. I really like tone mapping, though, so I'm willing to make that sacrifice a little bit. That's a choice that you have to make artistically, I guess. You can see the less tone mapping there is, the less noise there is. I don't know. It just seems to be a byproduct. It's actually better than the HDR software I used before. I used Luminance HDR for a little bit, and I would set the exposure in RawTherapee and then export to that. And the noise that came out was absolutely horrendous. So, yeah, it depends on the algorithm. I do really like tone mapping, though. What the edge stopping value does. Huh. So, vignette filters are fun, but they're pretty standard. Get these Instagram a little bit. I don't think I'm going to use one in this picture. So another setting I really like to use is vibrance. So what this does is it allows you to crank up the color in the image, how vibrant it is. This is really great because a lot of pictures tend to get washed out in general. You really do want to increase your saturation and contrast when you're editing images. This helps really make the pictures pop. And that's something I learned that helps with any picture. When I started off taking photos, I did not really know very much about editing and did not really play with things like curves or vibrance or anything like that. And I couldn't understand why my pictures didn't really look that good, even though I had a better camera. So it's really good to know these things. It really makes your picture really pop a lot. We have film simulation now. I actually haven't. This is new. Not quite sure what that does. Huh. Because maybe it needs an input. Another important thing is white balance. I think in this image we actually have a pretty good white balance going on. Spot white balance tends to be what I use as a crutch a little bit. Actually, let's see. Yeah, so that tended to shift a little bit towards the yellows because I selected something that was a little bit more blue. White balance, you really want to make sure you're selecting something white if you're doing spot white balance. Otherwise, it's better to just do it manually. But I've had images that are really bad in terms of white balance. They'll be really yellow or really blue, depending on the lighting conditions. So fluorescent lighting tends to mess up white balance a lot. Actually, I might pull up an image to show that pretty quickly, just when I get done with this one. I don't even know what this wavelet thing is. Never seen it before. So I'm not going to touch it quite yet. Although I learned most of the stuff just by going, oh, what does this button do? And just touching it. See what happens. There are some really neat toys in this program. Sharpening actually does increase noise as well, something that sometimes I'll shut off. It's turned on by default, but as you can see, it does actually make the image considerably sharper. So it's kind of a good thing to have on, I guess. Edges tends to add these, this is hard to really explain. Kind of puts more harsh corners on a lot of the more organic shapes. Gets rid of like the fuzziness, especially in leaves. I'm not a huge fan of using edges in most pictures. Noise reduction is useful. It gets rid of mostly a lot of impulse noise reduction. And these tend to get rid of a lot of the noise, a lot of the graininess. Usually stuff that comes out as a result of issues with the camera sensor. So a lot of junk like that. Chrominance. Let's see what's new. Defringe is actually important. Not in this particular picture, but I've noticed in a lot of pictures I'll actually get like these purple outlines on a lot of objects. That's frustrating. Defringe will help remove that. So yeah, I think this image is more or less complete. I'm trying to think what else I want to do to it. In this case, there's really not a ton going on besides the HDR. Let's save it. Just okay. Because Control Save does not save it anymore. Moment. Go down here. I guess it does work, huh? Save. Have to select your location. It tends to pick your previous location, not actually where the picture is from. It's a little bit frustrating. When you're picking your format, some things to take in mind are that PNG is uncompressed, but does not store EXIF data. So it won't store your exposure, your lens, your camera, those sort of things. Which, if you're using it on the internet, especially on Flickr, I know some groups actually want to have the EXIF data. I've run into problems with that in the past. I know I personally like having that data, and JPEG is usually used for internet. But if you're like a professional or you're trying to make images just for print, PNG is definitely better. TIFF is actually most uncompressed. These are massive files. I mean, TIFF is great if you're using it for image analysis, or if you're using it for printing pictures, if you're making movies, those sort of professional things, where perhaps it's not the final output or you're not dealing with it online. However, most websites will not accept the TIFF format when you're uploading them. They're too big and they don't tend to have any sort of support for it for whatever reason. But TIFF is by far the best in terms of compression, but I'm just going to go with JPEG here because I'm putting it on Flickr. So I'm going to go with OK. So down the bottom here, you'll see that there is a little save bar. Because I have a fairly decent desktop, it runs pretty quickly. When I was on my laptop, that might take a few minutes for the image to save. So just something to take in mind. Actually, you know what? I'm going to keep on going a little bit more with this picture. I just realized I haven't used any of the SiteCam settings. So this is CIE Color Appearance Model 02. It tends to be abbreviated in this as SciCam 02. So this again has more tone curves to play with. It's a little bit more harsh than the exposure ones. Tend to play with it a little bit. Let's see, is that good? This one tends to be much more drastic. Again, though, tone curves are great for contrast, making your image really pop, makes the darks darker, the lights lighter, that sort of thing. Really useful. Learning how to use curves is something I learned early on doing photography. It comes in handy a lot. Alright, so let's save it again. Okay, Control S is not doing that for me. Okay. Alright. So now let's see if we can compare these images. Oh, it does -1, it's appending. It's weird. Don't remember doing that. Alright. So let's see if we can open with just normal photo gallery. Yep, okay, we can. Sometimes I find in Windows you actually need to open the image using something other than photo gallery. Doesn't have the drivers installed. You can go online and find that. I believe it might come with the Windows Live like toolkit. Why is this not? Opening 2 windows in photo gallery. Okay, this is frustrating. Yeah, normally I can do side-by-side comparison. This is very frustrating. Anyhow. Actually, just at the RawTherapee output, so the original. I really like the color in the original more, actually. It keeps on giving me that stupid warning. So let's see, to make it match a little bit better. Looks like some of the issues are maybe with shadow compression. Doesn't look like it's as dark. Let's just increase contrast. That's not doing it. It's like decreasing contrast, cranking down the darks a bit more. There we go. So you can always add more handles to the tone curve. This allows you to make certain parts much lighter, much quicker. So make there much more contrast between two different tones. So the closer these are together, the more contrast there is. The quicker the colors, the quicker the tones change. I like that a lot more. So, weird. Seems like my Control-Z, Control-Shift-Z is actually messed up. So yeah, we have a lot more instantaneous contrast here when we're playing with the tone curve. So yeah, that's just some basic editing in RawTherapee. Now note that all of this stuff is non-destructive. I can go back and undo it, and it's not going to be like if you're editing in GIMP or Photoshop with a JPEG image, where eventually if you edit it enough, the image will actually be somewhat destroyed, or it'll lose a lot of data, and you can't just go back and change these settings after the fact. They kind of compound on each other, whereas here, every edit you do is not it doesn't matter what order you do them in. It doesn't change. Like if I go back and change saturation 5 or 6 times, I can actually reset it to its previous value. If I go back and change contrast, I can make it have less contrast or more contrast. There's no losing data when editing a RAW, which is really nice. And that's really why this is amazing to have, and have a toolkit like this. I know this program might have a lot of buttons. It might seem intimidating. Again, I don't even know what half the buttons do because of this update. But yeah, there's some basics of image editing in RawTherapee. And I guess lastly, I'll just show you how to adjust white balance. Alright, so to adjust white balance, I'm just going to close this. Yeah, just close and reopen it. Sorry, those are actually my recordings. Alright, so to adjust white balance, let's use a picture taken inside. So let's see. These are all from actually Anime Boston Convention, and in here we have a lot of indoor like fluorescent lighting. So a lot of it is way too yellow. So you really want to shift it towards the blue a bit more. So let's see. I guess we're gonna go with this picture here of Batman and Harley. So let's see. So the easiest way to do white balance adjustment is to just do a spot white balance on something that you assume to be white. So that was probably not exactly the greatest white thing. So let's try these lights actually. That's paper. So everything is a little bit different. I mean, the room is also a little bit yellow, so we have to take that into account. So this is probably a good white. This actually looks the best. So yeah, you just click on what point you want to be white with spot white balance. Say I think that maybe I did a little bit of overcompensation. Still needs to be a little bit more yellow. We can change the adjustment. See what it looked like before. So here's the original. Yeah, so we don't want it to be all that blue. There's definitely some yellow in this picture. We don't want that though. So we actually want a little less green. So yeah, white balance is something you really want to just play with for taste. It's really good if you have a reference. I've done pictures of things. I do a lot of practice with Legos actually for looking at lighting and things because they're very consistent in terms of color. So I also can use a reference when I'm adjusting white balance just to learn these tricks. If you have something that you know has a consistent color and that like it's familiar to you, that's always a good way to learn things. So yeah, this is RawTherapee and raw editing. So hopefully this shows you the power of why it's good to take pictures in RAW. And yeah, so that's it. So thanks for watching.